Hello everyone, my name is Nick Heelan, and today I'm going to be guiding you through my IBIO 445 public engagement project, Are Humans Evolving? I'm going to be looking at the interconnections between culture and evolution today. So on the agenda, we are going to try and address this common misconception of humans stopped evolving because of culture. To do this, we're going to look at what evolution is, we're going to try and define culture, and then we're going to play a fun game of trivia. We're going to see if you retained this knowledge and see how it can be applied. So, first, what is evolution? So, if we look around the world, we could see a staggering array of diversity in life, and evolution, at least in academic circles, is believed to be the cause of this. Evolution is going to be the gradual or slow process by which a new species of life originates from an older species. And through the process of evolution, that species can become better adapted to their environment. It's caused by genetic variation accumulating over time. So it typically happens by a population of a species gets separated from the rest of the species, and genetic variation accumulates in that isolated population to a point to where the isolated population, if we introduced to the original population, they can no longer interbreed. And at this point, that isolated population is then considered to be a new species. Something that is really important to consider, though, is that evolution is a process. There's no really start or end point. It's a continual, gradual process. So in order for evolution to occur, there has to be heritable genetic variation, which is caused by mutations. And while selective pressures may speed up evolution by preferentially selecting for certain genes, making it beneficial to have one gene over another, it is not needed for evolution. And then over here is just a nice little visual of evolution and how all of these different birds evolved from common ancestors. So culture is kind of a harder thing to define. There's no one agreed upon definition of culture that all researchers of the humanities use. It's still argued about how to even study culture, but for the purposes of this class, or at least this project, sorry, culture can be thought of as really any of the mannerisms an individual or a group does that impacts their day-to-day lives. So culture can impose environmental-like stimuli on humans, and this was shown in this article that I have cited here through culture shock. It was shown that culture shock can have adverse impacts on people and therefore acts like a stimuli, and therefore culture might also act as a type of selective pressure if it can act as a pseudo-environmental stimuli. So with this misconception of humans have stopped evolving because of culture, the people who believe in this typically think that culture somehow cushions humans from the natural world, prevents all environmental stimuli from reaching us, divides us from the animal kingdom. But they oftentimes forget that just in order for evolution to occur, there only needs to be heritable genetic variation. So even with something like genetic drift, in which genes are randomly selected to either be favorable or not favorable, so they either fall in and out of the gene pool randomly, this, given enough time, can cause a species to differentially adapt and speciate into a new species that can no longer interbreed with its predecessors. So, and the first main counter argument I'm going to put forth to the misconception that humans have stopped evolving due to culture is the fact that humans are still mutating, so there is still new genes being created, but also, and importantly, what's significant for evolution is that those mutations are happening in sex cells, and that in order for evolution to occur, the genetic variation has to be heritable. It has to be be able to be passed on to the future gene pool. And this article provided a great figure showing the mutation rate per billion base pairs per year, and it shows how it's changing for humans over time. So not only does this article show that humans are receiving new heritable genetic variation, but that also that rate is changing over time. So the second piece of evidence I'm going to use to argue that humans are indeed evolving despite culture is the fact that culture can sometimes act as a selective pressure. So, for example, the Kiwa people of West Africa are traditionally yam farmers, and in this image we see the Kiwa people and their yams. So, to farm yams, they have to clear a lot of forests, which means that there's going to be a lot more standing water year-round, causing there to be more mosquitoes and higher outbreaks and instances of malaria. Now, interestingly, if a person possesses the S allele heterozygous genotype of sickle cell anemia, so they have one of the alleles which produces the faulty sickle cell shaped blood cells, but then they have one of the normal functioning alleles which produces normal blood cells. This actually offers protection against malaria, and it's a beneficial trait to have from an evolutionary standpoint. So the idea is that this culture of farming created a selective pressure for having this heterozygous S allele genotype, and therefore drive a form of evolution in this group of people. Alright, and now it's time for trivia. So I'm going to ask you guys some pretty straightforward questions, some true or false, a couple multiple choice. And I'm going to read the questions to you, and then I'm going to read the answers to you, and I'm going to explain why some of the choices were correct and why some weren't. So yeah, I hope this is entertaining. Alright, let's start off a little easy. Evolution is A, how new species come about, B, a long, gradual process, C, isn't real, or D, A and B. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to think about it, and if you need a few more, you can pause the video here, but I'm going to go on and show the answer. So evolution is, and the correct answer was D, A and B. Evolution is going to be both a long and gradual process and also a process by which new species emerge or originate. So the next question, evolution requires what to occur? Selective pressures, predators to drive it, genetic variation, or D, A and C. Alright, gonna give you guys a few more seconds. If you need more time, go ahead and pause, and I'm gonna show the answer. So evolution requires what to occur? Genetic variation. So I don't know if I tricked you guys up with choice D, but remember selective pressures may help speed up evolution, but they're not the sole requirement for evolution. Alright, true or false? Culture is a well-defined term. Let's see if you guys were paying attention. Alright, if you need a pause, go ahead. But the answer is false. Culture is not well-defined. It's something that's argued by professionals in pretty much any and all field of humanities, and they can't even agree on how to study it. So, yeah. But an example of culture is music, art, various forms of cuisine, all of the above. And so if we remember that culture, I mean, some people like to define culture as any and all of the mannerisms that impact a person or done by a person or a group that impacts their day-to-day lives. Then the answer should be D, all of the above. All of those were great answers or great examples of culture. All right. A case study of pre-industrial law aux Condres. Sorry if I butchered that, I'm not good at pronouncing things. A French-Canadian population was performed. Over 140 years, the age of first reproduction for women dropped by 4 years. It is known that during this time, it was culturally expected to have as many children as possible for helping with family farm work. What can safely be inferred? The population is evolving into a new human species. A selective pressure for having children at a younger age was placed on these women. A new selective pressure is acting on various genes driving evolution. Evolution isn't real, and the human genome is non-changing. Alright. Give you guys a couple seconds to think about it. But the answer to this is actually going to be B. So that might have been tricky. There wasn't really too much you could pull out from that case study besides the fact that a possible selective pressure for having children at a younger age was introduced to these women, and it was due to culture. And last question for you guys. If it became a norm everywhere to avoid sunlight at all costs, and this norm continued for a few hundred years, could one expect to see a change in humanity in the future? Consider normal genetic drift, and that's a hint here. So the answers are no, the human genome is unchanging from generation to generation. B, the selective pressure would alter gene frequency of the human population. Humans evolve. C, no selective pressure, new selective pressure, but human culture will offset said pressure. Or D, this cultural change would allow for evolution as long as all the population is isolated. So I'm going to give you guys a moment to think about that. Right, so the answer is actually going to be a new selective pressure would alter gene frequency of the human population and humans evolve. Likely. I mean, this is a theoretical, but we know that there's going to be new mutations to genes which are essential and regulated upon by the natural selections of sunlight. And so if there's variations in those genes, which we can count on them happening based on that research article, which I showed you guys how humans are still mutating, and there's still lots of mutations happening throughout the genome. And since we have drastically changed the selective pressure of, hey, there's sunlight, we need to have UV radiation protection, to there's really no more sunlight, we're avoiding it, yeah, we're probably going to see some new adaptation of humans. So that is it. Thank you so much for coming with me on my public engagement project, and thank you again. Also, here is my bibliography. If anyone wants to check out any of the sources and learn more about these topics and how culture and evolution are interconnected, feel free to check these out.